There was a moment in my life when I looked in the mirror and thought, this is it. I've lost, I'm done. But what I didn't realize then was that life wasn't shutting a door on me. Life was pushing me toward a completely new beginning. Sometimes the moments that feel like collapse are actually the moments that crack us open. Sometimes what feels like losing is life clearing space for the strength, clarity, and power you're about to step into. You're not at the end. You're standing at the front edge of a brand new chapter. And this is where everything starts. When you feel like you're losing, it shakes something deep inside you. It hits your confidence, your certainty, your sense of direction. You start questioning everything, your decisions, your strength, your identity. And in that emotional fog, it's so easy to believe the story that you're falling behind, that you're not enough, that maybe life just isn't going to open the doors you hoped it would. But here's the truth most people never realize until they're far past the moment. What feels like losing is often the exact moment your new beginning is being born. Not after the pain, not after the confusion, but inside it. In the middle of the mess you're trying so hard to escape, there's always a moment before the breakthrough where everything feels like it's breaking down. Think about your own life. Every major transformation you've ever experienced probably started with discomfort, uncertainty, or something falling apart. That relationship ending, it forced you to grow in ways comfort never could. That job you lost, it pushed you to discover abilities you wouldn't have tapped into otherwise. That plan that didn't work out, it redirected you towards something better aligned with who you're becoming. Losing is rarely the end. It's the clearing, the space that life opens so something new can finally take root. But most people don't see it because they're stuck looking at the immediate moment, not the long game. They're zoomed into the pain instead of zooming out to the pattern. When you zoom out, you start noticing something crucial. Every great growth spurt in your life began at the moment you thought you were failing. You weren't failing, you were shedding. Shedding old beliefs, shedding old limitations, shedding parts of yourself that couldn't go with you to the next level. Losing isn't losing when it's clearing the path for who you're destined to become. Yet in the moment, your mind tells a different story. It tells you to cling, to panic, to retreat. It whispers that you're not capable, not ready, not strong enough. But that's because your mind is wired for safety, not transformation. Safety feels like certainty. Growth feels like chaos. And when chaos shows up, your brain interprets it as losing, but your soul recognizes it as an invitation to rise, to step into the next chapter, to evolve. And that's when you have a choice. Stay locked in the story of loss or open your eyes to the reality of beginnings. Because beginnings rarely announce themselves with clarity and comfort. They show up disguised as frustration, setbacks, endings, and doubt. They show up wearing the mask of failure. But the moment you connect the dots between losing and becoming, everything changes. You stop resisting and start recognizing. You stop fighting the moment and start listening to it. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this preparing me for? That shift in perspective is where the power is, because perspective is the difference between giving up and growing up. It's the difference between staying stuck and stepping forward. When you shift from I'm losing to I'm beginning, you immediately reclaim your strength. You reclaim your energy. You reclaim your focus. Suddenly the setback is no longer a wall, it's a doorway. You just hadn't realized it yet. There's a reason that the world's most resilient people don't crumble in the face of adversity. They've trained themselves to look past the surface. They understand that losing doesn't mean stop. Losing doesn't mean you're unworthy. Losing doesn't mean you're done. It means the old chapter is closing because it can't hold the next version of you. It means your identity is evolving. Your capacity is expanding. Your path is rerouting towards something more aligned with your future than your past. And if you're in that moment right now, if something in your life feels like it's slipping away, collapsing, or crumbling, hear this, you are not losing. You're transitioning. The emotion you're feeling isn't defeat. It's discomfort, and discomfort is the birthplace of transformation. It's the signal that you're standing at the edge of growth, not the edge of failure. Life is not taking something from you, it's repositioning you. It's pushing you to rise in a way comfort never would. The truth is you are stronger in this moment than you realize. The fact that you're even feeling this much means you still care, you're still fighting, you're still reaching. People who have truly lost don't feel anything. They've given up, but you haven't. The fact that you're hurting means the story is still alive inside you. And if the story is alive, the beginning is right there. All you have to do is step into it. Your job right now is to stop judging the moment and start trusting the process. Trust that life is unfolding in ways you can't see yet. Trust that this moment is molding you, preparing you, sharpening you. Trust that the version of you on the other side of this will look back and say, I thought I was losing, but that was the moment everything changed. And maybe the most important thing, give yourself permission to start again. to rise again, to believe again. Because the end of one path is the beginning of another, and beginnings don't require perfection. They just require willingness. Willingness to take the next step, willingness to grow past the pain, willingness to believe that the story is still unfolding in your favor, even if you don't have the evidence yet. This moment is not your downfall. It's your awakening. You're not collapsing. You evolving. You're not losing. You're beginning. And this is where everything starts. When you begin to understand the power of perspective, everything in your life shifts. Not because your circumstances magically change, not because the obstacles disappear, but because the meaning you attach to those moments transforms. And meaning is everything. The same event that breaks one person becomes the fuel that launches another. The same setback that shuts someone down becomes the catalyst that wakes someone else up. It's never the experience itself. It's the lens through which you view it. We've all had moments where we were convinced life was working against us. Moments where the weight felt too heavy, the pressure too intense, the path too uncertain. In those moments, it's easy to fall into a mindset that says, why me? Why now? Why this? But the moment you shift that focus, even slightly, and start asking, what is this shaping in me? What strength is this building? What opportunity is being hidden inside this challenge? Suddenly, the entire emotional landscape changes. You take back control of the story instead of letting the story control you. Perspective is the gateway to your potential. When you look at something through a narrow lens, everything feels like an emergency. Everything feels final. Everything feels like it defines you. But when you widen that lens, when you step back emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you start to see a bigger picture. You see that what felt like a dead end was actually a detour. What felt like rejection was redirection. What felt like loss was preparation. That shift doesn't just change how you feel, it changes what you're capable of. Most people don't realize how often they're being limited by their own interpretation of the moment. They think they're stuck because of circumstances, but they're really stuck because of their perspective. They think they're overwhelmed because of the challenge, but they're overwhelmed because they believe the challenge is bigger than them. And once you believe something is bigger than you, you shrink in your own eyes. You start playing small, thinking small, reacting small. But the moment you shift your interpretation, you expand. You rise, you become resourceful instead of fearful, alive instead of defeated. And it's not about pretending everything is perfect. It's not about putting a fake smile on real pain. It's about choosing a perspective that empowers you rather than paralyzes you. It's about recognizing that you're not the victim of your story. You're the author, and an author can rewrite any chapter, no matter how it started. Life will always give you evidence for whatever perspective you choose. If you believe you're losing, you'll find proof everywhere. You'll see every delay, every mistake, every conflict as confirmation that you're not enough. But if you believe you're growing, if you believe you're evolving, if you believe the universe is shaping you for something greater, you'll find evidence for that too. You'll start noticing the lessons, the progress, the openings you couldn't see before. Your mind becomes your ally instead of your enemy. And the wild thing is, nothing outside of you needs to change for that shift to happen. You do. Need a different job, a different relationship, a different body, a different past? You just need a different interpretation. The power is internal. The moment you decide to change the meaning, everything external begins to bend around that new meaning. Think about the times in your life when you thought something was falling apart, only to look back years later and realize it was falling into place. You met someone better because someone else left. You discovered your strength because a situation forced you to. You realized what you truly wanted because a challenge stripped away what wasn't meant for you. You didn't know it then, but the experience didn't change. Your perspective did. And this is the secret that separates people who rise from people who break. The ones who rise are not necessarily stronger, smarter, or luckier. They simply interpret differently. When fear shows up, they don't see it as a stop sign. They see it as a signal that they're on the edge of growth. When failure hits, they don't say, this is the end. They say, this is the lesson. When uncertainty creeps in, they don't crumble. They get curious. They look deeper. They expand their frame until the solution becomes visible. And here's the part most people overlook. Your perspective is something you choose every single day. It's not automatic. It's not passive. It's intentional. You wake up and you decide how you're going to see the world, how you're going to see yourself, how you're going to interpret the moments that unfold. You decide whether you're going to focus on what's missing or what's growing, whether you're going to cling to fear or step into possibility, whether you're going to replay the same story or write a new one. Everything in your life expands when your perspective expands. Your resilience expands. Your hope expands. Your creativity expands. Your capacity expands. Denly, you're not reacting from fear. You're responding from strength. You're not drowning in the moment. You're navigating it. You're not getting stuck in the story of losing. You're stepping forward into the story of beginning, but none of that happens as long as you're locked into the old lens, as long as you keep interpreting setbacks as signs that you're not worthy, as long as you keep labeling yourself based on temporary moments, as long as you give your past the power to write your future. The moment you shift your perspective, you shift your life, because the meaning you create becomes the foundation you stand on. So if something in your life feels heavy right now, if you feel uncertain, lost, or overwhelmed, I want you to pause and ask yourself, is the problem the situation, or is the problem the meaning I've attached to it? And what else could this mean? What else could this be preparing me for? What strength is this moment building in me that comfort never could? When you start looking through that lens, you reclaim your power, you reclaim your focus, you reclaim your future. And suddenly, what once looked like losing begins to look like the beginning of something far greater than you imagined. Because the moment you change your perspective, you change your direction. And when you change your direction, you change your destiny. This is the moment everything starts to shift. There's a moment in every person's life where the struggle becomes so heavy, so relentless, so overwhelming that you start believing something is wrong with you. You think the struggle means you're failing. You think it means you're weak. You think it means you're falling behind. But the truth is, struggle isn't a sign of weakness at all. It's a sign that life is preparing you, shaping you, strengthening you in ways you can't yet see. There is a hidden power inside struggle, something most people never tap into because all they can see is the pain. But if you shift your awareness, if you lean into it instead of running from it, you begin to realize that the very moments you want to escape are the moments that forge the strongest, most resilient, most unstoppable version of you. Think about it. Strength is never built in comfort. Confidence is never built in safety. Wisdom is never built in ease. Every powerful quality you admire in yourself or others was born in a moment of challenge, a moment where quitting felt easier than continuing, a moment where the world seemed to press against you with everything it had. And yet you pushed back. You didn't give up. You didn't collapse. You didn't surrender. Maybe you bent, maybe you fell, maybe you stumbled, but you didn't stay down. And that decision, that choice, that small flicker of defiance in the darkness, that is where real strength is born. Struggle has a way of revealing who you truly are. Not the polished version you show to the world, not the curated image you want people to see, but the real you, the part of you that can endure, the part of you that can rise, the part of you that can choose courage even when fear is screaming louder than your hope. You don't discover that part of yourself when things are easy. You only discover it when you're tested, when everything you rely on is questioned, when everything familiar falls apart, when you're forced to stand on ground that's shaking beneath your feet and still say, I'm not done, but inside that struggle, something else is happening too, something subtle, something powerful. Your capacity is expanding. What once felt impossible starts becoming manageable. What once terrified you starts becoming familiar. What once defeated you starts becoming something you can handle with a calm mind and a steady heart. You're adapting, evolving, rising, and you do. Even notice it happening because growth in real time never feels like growth. It feels like stretching. It feels like discomfort. It feels like friction. But friction is what sharpens you. The struggle is not the enemy. The struggle is the sculptor. It chisels away the parts of you that no longer serve you. It strips away the illusions, the doubts, the insecurities that keep you playing small. It forces you to confront the stories you've believed about yourself. Stories that say you're not enough, not capable, not worthy, and it challenges you to write new ones. Every difficult moment is working on you, carving you into a version of yourself you haven't met yet, but desperately need to become. And here's the part people forget. The moment you start resisting the struggle, you prolong it. The moment you fight it, resent it, avoid it, you're pushing against the very force that's trying to push you forward. But when you embrace it, not love it, not enjoy it, but accept it, you unlock the strength hidden inside it. You stop seeing it as punishment and start seeing it as preparation. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this building within me? That shift transforms everything. The strongest people you know aren't strong because they avoided struggle. They're strong because they walked through it. They showed up on days they didn't want to. They kept going when it didn't make sense. They believed in the possibility of rising even when the evidence wasn't there yet. They didn't wait for perfect conditions to become powerful. They became powerful because the conditions weren't perfect. And the same thing is happening inside you right now. Even if you can't see it, even if the struggle feels like too much, even if your heart feels tired, even if life feels unfair, you are being strengthened in ways that will reveal themselves later. A moment where you'll look back and say, that was the turning point. That pain became my power. That struggle became my foundation. It's always clearer in hindsight, but you don't have to wait years to trust that it's true. You can trust it now. Because here's what you have to remember. Nothing grows without resistance. The seed pushes against the soil. The muscle tears before it strengthens. The butterfly fights the cocoon to build the wings it needs to fly. If the struggle were removed, the strength would never develop. If the challenge were erased, the character would never form. If the friction disappeared, the transformation would too. You are not struggling because you're weak. You're struggling because you're upgrading. You're outgrowing versions of yourself you no longer need. You're stepping into a chapter that requires more of you, more courage, more clarity, more resilience, more belief, and the struggle is shaping you into the person who can handle that chapter with confidence and purpose. So if life feels heavy right now, if the path feels uncertain, if you feel tested in ways you didn't expect, don't shrink, don't retreat, don't close your heart, lean in, breathe through it. Trust that there is strength being built inside you that you will one day rely on. Trust that the fire you feel is forging something powerful. Trust that this is not breaking you, it's building you, because the struggle you're facing right now is not a sign that you're losing, it's the proof that you're becoming. There's something powerful that happens when you learn to recognize the small wins in your life. Most people are waiting for the big moment, the massive breakthrough, the life-changing success, the dramatic transformation to finally feel like they're moving forward. But the truth is, those big moments are rare. They're special. They're the result of hundreds of small, most invisible victories that no one sees, not even you sometimes. And if you don't learn to honor those small wins, you rob yourself of the fuel you need to keep going, especially in the moments when life feels heavy or progress feels slow. Small wins are like whispers from life saying, you're on the right path. Don't stop. Don't underestimate this step. But most people ignore them because they don't look impressive. They don't feel big enough. They don't match the highlight reels they see on social media or the stories they built in their minds about how success should look. And because they overlook these small victories, they convince themselves they're not making progress. They tell themselves they stuck, that nothing's changing, that they're behind. But in reality, they're moving forward. They just haven't trained their mind to see it. Think about how a mountain is climbed. Not through one dramatic leap, but through thousands of small, steady steps. Half the time, the climber doesn't even realize how far they've come until they stop and look back. Progress is sneaky like that. It hides in the daily choices you make. Getting up when you don't want to. Trying again when you're tired. Choosing hope when it's easier to choose fear. Showing up when no one would have blamed you for walking away. Those are small wins, and they matter more than you think. Celebrate the day you got out of bed when everything in you wanted to stay under the covers. Celebrate the moment you had the tough conversation you'd been avoiding. Celebrate the decision to take the next step instead of giving up. Celebrate the tiny bit of discipline you use today that you didn't have yesterday. These moments may not look like much, but they're shaping your future. They're building momentum. They're building confidence. They're building belief. The human mind is wired to notice what's miss more than what's present. It's wired to highlight what you haven't done instead of what you have. So if you don't intentionally recognize your small wins, your brain will trick you into thinking you're failing even when you're not. And that's where so many people get stuck. They're winning, but they don't feel like it, so they stop. They quit right before the breakthrough, not because they're incapable, but because they're blind to their own progress. When you train yourself to celebrate small wins, something incredible happens. You start to feel alive again. You start to feel capable. You start building trust with yourself. You begin to believe that you can follow through, that you can grow, that you can handle what life throws at you. Confidence doesn't come from massive achievements. It comes from consistent evidence that you're moving forward. And small wins give you that evidence every single day. Don't wait for the big victory to feel proud of yourself. Feel proud every time you choose alignment over avoidance, every time you choose growth over comfort, every time you choose action over excuses. That's progress. That's strength. That's momentum. And momentum is what carries you to the big moments that everyone notices. Most people have this idea that success is one giant leap. They think that one day everything will magically shift. But real success is built slowly, quietly, on the days that feel ordinary, the days that look unimpressive, the days that seem like they don't matter. But they do. They're the foundation beneath your future. And the stronger your foundation, the higher you can rise. When you start celebrating small wins, you also change your relationship with the journey. You stop feeling rushed. You stop feeling like you're chasing something. You stop feeling like you're behind. You start realizing that every step counts. Every moment shapes you. Every tiny decision matters. And suddenly, life feels more alive, more meaningful, more empowering. You become present instead of constantly chasing the future. And that presence gives you a deeper sense of fulfillment, even before the big results show up. And here's something important. Small wins don't just build confidence. They build identity. Every time you accomplish something, no matter how small, you reinforce the idea that you are someone who takes action, someone who follows through, someone who grows, someone who rises. And that identity is far more valuable than any external achievement. Because when you believe you are the kind of person who wins, even in small ways, you start showing up in big ways. Most people underestimate how powerful it is to simply keep going. Persistence doesn't feel sexy. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't get applause. But persistence creates inevitability. If you keep showing up, if you keep stacking small wins day after day, eventually you'll look back and realize the life you once dreamed about is now the life you're living. It wasn't the one giant moment that got you there. It was the hundreds of moments you didn't even realize were shaping you. And the beautiful thing about celebrating small wins is that it shifts your emotional state. You stop living in lack. You stop living in frustration. You start living in gratitude. And gratitude creates strength. Gratitude creates energy. Gratitude opens your mind to possibility. When you're grateful for the small steps, you naturally take bigger ones. When you honor the journey, the results take care of themselves. So today, look at your life through a new lens. Don't ask, why am I not further? Ask, how far have I already come? Don't say, I'm not there yet. Say, I'm getting stronger with every step. Don't wait for the finish line to feel victorious. Feel victorious, Eve. Right time you move forward, no matter how small the movement may seem. Because those small wins, they're not just moments, they're evidence. Evidence that you're rising, evidence that you're shifting, evidence that your story is still unfolding, evidence that you're not losing, you're building. And every small victory you honor becomes the momentum that carries you toward the life you were meant to create. Celebrate the small wins because they're the proof that you are on your way. There's a moment in everyone's life when you look at a setback and you immediately label it as failure. It feels final. It feels heavy. It feels like proof that you're not good enough, not capable enough, not meant for the thing you were fighting for. But the truth is, failure is never final. It's feedback. It's information. It's a signal that something in your strategy needs to shift, not that you need to quit. And the people who truly rise in life aren't the ones who avoid failure. They're the ones who learn how to read it. They use it. They let it sharpen them instead of letting it shut them down. Most people were taught to fear failure. Growing up, we were conditioned to believe that mistakes were something to hide, something to be ashamed of. We learned that getting it wrong meant something was wrong with us. So we grew up playing small, staying safe, choosing paths where the risk of embarrassment was low. And because of that conditioning, the moment we experience a setback later in life, our minds instantly go into panic mode. See, you shouldn't have tried. You're not built for this. You're out of your league. But that voice isn't truth. It's programming. And it's programming that keeps millions of people stuck in the same spot year after year. The moment you see failure as feedback, everything changes. It becomes a tool instead of a threat, a guide instead of a wound. When something doesn't work out, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you start asking better questions. What can this teach me? What part of my approach needs adjusting? What assumption was I making that wasn't true? What skills do I need to refine? The answers to these questions don't weaken you. They empower you. They give you clarity. They give you direction. They give you the ability to grow consciously instead of blindly. Think about any great inventor, leader, athlete, or creator. Their success stories are filled with failures, repeated ones, painful ones, public ones. But what separates them from the rest of the world is that they didn't interpret those failures as signs that they were done. They didn't attach their identity to the setback. They didn't crumble because their first attempt wasn't perfect. They kept adjusting. They kept learning. They kept refining. They saw each failure as a piece of data pointing them closer to the solution. Failure gives you information that success never could. Success can be deceiving. Success makes you feel like you're invincible, like everything you're doing is working. But failure tells the truth. It shows you where you're assuming instead of deciding, where you're hoping instead of preparing, where you're repeating patterns that no longer serve you. It exposes the weaknesses you need to strengthen and highlights the strengths you haven't used yet. It's honest, it's direct, and it's one of the most powerful teachers you will ever have. But here's the part most people forget. Failure only becomes valuable when you interpret it correctly. If you label as proof of your inadequacy, you lose its lesson. If you label it as the ending, you lose the opportunity it's trying to open. If you use it to beat yourself down, you disconnect from the wisdom it's offering. The key is detaching failure from identity. Failure is something that happens, not something you are. You can fail at an attempt without failing at your life. You can fail at a moment without failing at your purpose. And sometimes failure isn't even failure, it's prevention. Have you ever looked back and realized something didn't work out because it wasn't meant to? You were protected from a situation, a relationship, a commitment that wasn't aligned with your growth. You didn't fail, you were redirected, you didn't lose, you were guided. Life has a way of removing what doesn't belong, even when you don't understand it in the moment. Failure often clears the path to something far better than what you were trying to force. There's strength in allowing failure to guide you rather than break you. When you stop resisting it and start listening, you become unstoppable because nothing scares you anymore. Not rejection, not embarrassment, not setbacks. You develop resilience. You build adaptability. You cultivate a mindset that says, if it doesn't work, I'll adjust. If I stumble, I'll stand again. If I fall, I'll rise stronger. When you have that mindset, failure loses its power over you. It becomes part of the process rather than a threat to your identity. And here's what happens. Next, you start taking bigger risks, not reckless risks, calculated ones. You start stepping into bigger opportunities because you're no longer paralyzed by the possibility of getting it wrong. You start pursuing dreams that used to intimidate you because you know that if things don't go perfectly, it's not the end of the world. It's part of the journey. Failure becomes less of a wall and more of a doorway. You walk through it instead of retreating from it. Most people never reach their potential because they quit at the feedback stage. They take the first no, the first setback, the first struggle as a sign that they're not destined for more, and that's the tragedy. Because the truth is, the moment you receive feedback is the moment you're closest to a breakthrough. That's where you refine. That's where you grow. That's where you learn what you need to shift. You're not being stopped. You're being shaped. You're being prepared for the version of success that actually aligns with who you're becoming. If your life feels like it's full of failures right now, take a breath, step back, look deeper. What is life trying to teach you? What strategy needs adjusting? What belief needs upgrading? What pattern needs breaking? What opportunity is being redirected? Failure is not the story. It's part of the editing process. And every great story has revisions. When you embrace failure as feedback, you stop fearing the journey. You stop fearing the missteps. You stop fearing the messiness of growth. You realize that every experience, whether it goes as planned or falls apart, is moving you forward. Nothing is wasted. Nothing is meaningless. Everything teaches, everything builds, everything prepares. Failure isn't the end. It's the instruction manual for your next chapter. There comes a point in your journey where you realize the pressure you're carrying doesn't come from life itself. It comes from the expectations you've placed on yourself. Expectations to be perfect. Expectations to get everything right on the first try. Expectations to move fast, look strong, never stumble, never doubt, never show weakness. And those expectations become a prison. They shrink your world. They drain your energy. They turn you into someone who's trying to perform instead of someone who's trying to grow. But real change, real transformation never comes from perfection. It comes from commitment. Commitment to evolving even when it's messy. Commitment to becoming even when you don't have it all figured out. Commitment to showing up as you are, not as the perfect version your mind tells you you should be. We live in a world obsessed with results. Everything is measured by outcomes, how fast you got there, how much you achieved, how flawless you look while doing it. And because of that, people have forgotten how to honor the process. They've forgotten that mastery takes time, that growth has phases, that becoming your best self is not a clean, linear journey. It's a wild, unpredictable, beautifully imperfect one. When you focus on perfection, you freeze, you procrastinate, you hold back your potential because you're terrified of making mistakes. But when you focus on growth, you move forward. You take risks. You allow yourself to learn through experience instead of waiting for some imaginary moment where you finally feel ready. Perfection is a trap. It convinces you that there's a right way to grow, a right time to start, a right pace to follow. It makes you compare your chapter 1 to someone else's chapter 20. It makes you hide your vulnerability because you think it's a flaw. It makes you judge yourself harshly for being human, for learning, for stumbling, for evolving. But commitment to growth frees you. It gives you permission to experiment, to explore, to try, to fail, to rise. It gives you permission to be in process, not just in outcomes. And the truth is, every person you admire, every person who's achieved something extraordinary did it through imperfect action. They learned by doing. They learned by falling. They learned by adjusting. They didn't wait until they had every answer. They didn't wait until they felt confident. They didn't wait for the perfect moment because they knew the perfect moment doesn't exist. What exists is the decision to start. What exists is the willingness to grow. What exists is the courage to commit to the journey rather than obsessing over the destination. When you let go of perfection and embrace growth, something incredible happens. You become more resilient. You stop taking your mistakes personally. You stop letting setbacks define you. You stop interpreting obstacles as stop signs and start seeing them as part of the path, because growth is supposed to be uncomfortable. If it were easy, everyone would do it. If it were perfect, you wouldn't learn anything. The discomfort is the evidence that you're stretching, expanding, evolving into a version of yourself that's stronger than the one you were yesterday. And when you shift into that mindset, you also stop comparing yourself to others. Perfection thrives on comparison. It needs it. It constantly wants to measure where you stand relative to everyone else. But growth is personal. It's intimate. It's yours. It doesn't matter how fast someone else is moving. It doesn't matter how polished their life looks. It doesn't matter if they seem to be ahead. You're not here to live their story. You're here to live yours. And your story has its own timing, its own rhythm, its own lessons. The moment you stop comparing and start committing, you reclaim your power. You reclaim your self-respect. You reclaim the energy you've been giving away by trying to measure up to unrealistic standards. Too many people waste years trying to appear perfect instead of allowing themselves to become powerful. They hide their insecurities instead of healing them. They pretend to be confident instead of building real confidence. They look for shortcuts instead of doing the inner work. But when you commit to growth, you stop pretending. You start practicing. You start showing up authentically, even when you're uncertain. You start doing the hard things because you know the hard things are what shape you. There's a kind of freedom that comes when you stop performing and start becoming. You stop judging yourself for where you are and start appreciating the fact that you're evolving. You start taking pride in your progress instead of punishing yourself for not being perfect. You start recognizing that every challenge, every mistake, every imperfect attempt is actually part of your training. It's life preparing you, strengthening you, molding you for what's coming next. Commitment to growth also brings something else. Patience, real patience. The kind of patience that lets you breathe, lets you trust, lets you stay grounded even when you're not seeing immediate results. When you're obsessed with perfection, you feel like a failure if your progress isn't instant. You think something is wrong with you. You rush, you push, you force. But when you commit to growth, you understand that progress often happens quietly beneath the surface. You understand that seeds don't sprout the moment you plant them. You understand that transformation takes time, and time is not your enemy, it's your partner. And here's the beautiful part. When you focus on growth, perfection stops mattering. The pressure lifts. The self-judgment softens. The fear of messing up loses its power. You start living with more curiosity, more courage, more compassion for yourself. You begin to see your journey not as a race, but as an unfolding. You begin to appreciate the version of you that's trying, learning, rising, even when you're not at your best. And eventually something clicks. You realize that perfection was never the goal. It was never the point. The goal was expansion. The point was evolution. The journey was always about who you were become, not how flawlessly you could pretend to be someone you're not. When you let go of perfection, you don't lower your standards. You raise your potential. You step into a path where growth becomes inevitable because you're no longer fighting yourself. You're working with yourself. You're honoring your pace, your progress, your humanity. So if you feel overwhelmed, if you feel behind, if you feel like you're not enough because you haven't gotten everything right, breathe. You're not supposed to be perfect. You're supposed to be progressing. You're supposed to be learning who you really are through the journey, not performing for an audience that isn't even watching. Perfection is a cage. Growth is liberation. And when you choose growth over perfection, you begin to rise in ways perfection could never allow. This is where your evolution begins. There comes a moment in every journey where the world feels loud, too loud. Opinions, judgments, comparisons, expectations, they swirl around you like a storm you never asked to walk into. And if you're not careful, that noise becomes so overwhelming that it drowns out the one voice that actually matters, your own. The voice that knows your truth, the voice that knows your potential, the voice that knows your direction, even when the path feels unclear. But somewhere along the way, you start giving more weight to the noise outside of you than the wisdom inside you. And that's when you begin to feel lost. The truth is, most people don't get lost because they're weak or unprepared. They get lost because they've forgotten how to listen to themselves. They've forgotten that clarity doesn't come from the world. It comes from within. But we're taught from a young age to look outward for validation, for answers, for permission. We're taught to measure our worth by the standards of others, not by our own internal compass. And so we grow up seeking approval instead of alignment. We chase applause instead of authenticity. We pursue what looks good instead of what feels true. But there's a moment, a turning point, where you realize the noise around you is costing you the life within you. And that moment is powerful because it brings you back to the only place where clarity ever existed, your inner voice. That voice is not loud. It's not dramatic. It doesn't scream for attention. It whispers, it nudges, it speaks in the quiet moments, the in-between spaces, the stillness you create when you step away from the chaos. And if you haven't been hearing it lately, it's not because it disappeared. It's because you haven't created the space to listen. People underestimate just how much clarity they already have. Deep down, you know when something is right for you. You know when you're betraying yourself. You know when you're forcing a path that doesn't fit anymore. You know when you're staying in a chapter you've outgrown. You know when something feels aligned or when it feels heavy. But you talk yourself out of it. You silence yourself because you assume the world knows better. You override your instincts because you don't want to disappoint, disrupt, or deviate from what others expect. But the truth is, your inner voice is the most honest, unfiltered source of guidance you will ever have. It has no agenda. It's not influenced by insecurity or pressure. It's not affected by comparison or competition. It speaks from your highest self. The part of you that isn't scared, isn't confused, isn't trying to fit in. And that voice becomes your strongest compass when you finally give it room to be heard. Listening to yourself doesn't mean you shut out the world. It means you stop letting the world override your truth. It means you take in information, but you run it through your own filter. It means you stop abandoning your intuition every time someone disagrees with it. It means you give yourself permission to trust the wisdom you've earned through your experiences, your struggles, your breakthroughs, your failures. Every breakthrough you've ever had came from listening to yourself. Every shift, every pivot, every moment where you finally said enough, or this is the direction I need to go, or I can't keep living like this, came from that inner voice cutting through the noise. And the more you learn to honor that voice, the stronger it becomes. It's like a muscle. The more you use it, the more powerful it gets. The more you ignore it, the weaker it becomes. Not because it stops speaking, but because you stop recognizing its power. Some of the most painful chapters of your life didn't come from trusting yourself. They came from abandoning yourself. They came from ignoring the signs. They came from staying where your soul was already asking you to leave. They came from holding on to people, habits, and patterns long after your inner voice whispered, this isn't right. And the guilt, the regret, the frustration you feel now isn't because you failed. It's because you knew better. You felt it, but you talked yourself out of your own truth. But here's the beautiful part. You can reconnect to that voice at any moment. It's never too late. It's not conditional. It doesn't hold grudges. It's always available, always ready, always willing to guide you back to your path. You just have to create space. You just have to get quiet enough to hear it. You have to give yourself permission to listen without judging, analyzing, or explaining away what you feel. And when you do, everything shifts. Decisions become clearer. Boundaries become easier. The path forward becomes less foggy. You stop overthinking every step because you're no longer making choices from fear. You're making them from alignment. You stop looking for signs from the world because you start recognizing the signals from within. You stop chasing validation because you realize the only validation you ever needed was your own, and something else happens. You start attracting what's aligned with you. Not because you're trying harder, but because you're finally being who you actually are. You stop trying to fit into places that dim you. You stop forcing connections that drain you. You stop pretending to be someone you're not just to be accepted. You begin to live from a place of internal truth, and that truth becomes a magnet. It brings the right opportunities, the right people, the right breakthroughs into your life because you're no longer out of sync with yourself. Listening to your inner voice also teaches you how to stand alone when necessary. Not lonely, just solid, grounded, rooted, unshaken. Most people fear being alone because they've never actually met themselves. They've never spent enough time in stillness to realize they're not empty. They're full of ideas, dreams, wisdom, strength. When you learn to listen inward, you stop fearing solitude because solitude becomes clarity. Solitude becomes recalibration. Solitude becomes power. And when you reconnect with your inner guidance, you begin to trust the journey again. Even when you can't see the whole map, you start taking steps without needing every answer. You start moving with confidence, not because you know what's going to happen, but because you know you can handle it. You know you can listen. You know you can adjust. You know you can rise. That's what inner wisdom gives you, unshakable trust. Not trust in the world, not trust in circumstances, trust in yourself. And that's the key. Because the moment you trust yourself, life stops feeling like something that's happening to you and starts feeling like something you're creating. G. You stop reacting and start directing. You stop doubting and start deciding. You stop wandering and start moving with intention. The world will always have noise. It will always have opinions. It will always have distractions. But when you learn to quiet the outside world and tune into your internal one, you reconnect with the deepest intelligence you have. And that's when you stop feeling lost and start feeling led. There comes a point in your journey where you look back at everything you once thought disqualified you, everything you believed made you broken, weak, behind, or unworthy, and you finally see it for what it truly was: training, not punishment, not proof that you weren't enough. Training, preparation, refinement. Life wasn't trying to break you. It was trying to build you into someone capable of carrying the weight of the future you were born to step into. And the moment you understand that, the moment you recognize that your biggest challenges were actually shaping you, everything inside you realigns. You stop resenting your past and you start reclaiming it, because here's the truth most people never realize: nothing you've gone through is wasted. Not the heartbreak, not the failures, not the moments you fell apart, not the seasons where you felt lost and directionless, not the times you were rejected, misunderstood, or overlooked. Every experience you've had, especially the painful ones, left you with tools, awareness, resilience, emotional intelligence, courage, and perspective that you couldn't have learned any other way. And those tools are exactly what position you to rise now in ways you couldn't have risen before. But the problem is, when you're in the middle of the struggle, you don't see that. You don't see the purpose. You only feel the weight. You feel the confusion, the fear, the frustration of wondering, why is this happening? Why is it happening to me? In those moments, it's easy to believe you're being punished. It's easy to believe life is unfair. It's easy to believe that you're falling behind. But the reality is, the moments that felt like setbacks were actually getting you ready for breakthroughs you weren't strong enough to carry yet. And sometimes the preparation hurts. Growth always has a cost. Transformation always requires something of you, but nothing is taken from you without something greater being built in its place. Think about it. The strongest people you've ever met, the ones who move with purpose, the ones who have depth, compassion, wisdom, and unshakable strength, didn't become that way because everything was easy. They became that way because life challenged them, stretched them, humbled them, awakened them. And whether they knew it or not, they were being equipped. Just like you've been equipped. You didn't survive what you survived by accident. You didn't get back up every time by accident. You didn't persevere, endure, or keep going by accident. Something in you was being forged. Something in you was being built. Something in you was being awakened. Every chapter was preparing you for the next one. Every season was strengthening you for what was coming. Every challenge was expanding your capacity to handle more, lead more, receive more, become more. And the beautiful thing is, once you start seeing your experiences through that lens, your whole relationship with your past changes. You stop carrying shame. You stop carrying regret. You stop judging yourself for who you were back then, because now you understand that who you were had to exist. Otherwise, you would never have become who you are now. You start realizing that even the moments you thought broke, you were actually setting you free from the version of yourself you were never meant to stay in. Life wasn't dismantling you. It was rebuilding you. But here's the key to unlocking the power of your past. You have to stop running from it. You have to stop hating it. You have to stop wishing it didn't happen, because when you resist your past, you drag its pain forward. But when you embrace your past, you reclaim its lessons. You take back the strength it gave you. You extract the wisdom that was buried inside the struggle. You step into the fullness of what those experiences prepared you for. There's a kind of confidence that comes from knowing you've been through hell and you're still here. A confidence that doesn't need validation. A confidence that doesn't need perfection. A confidence that doesn't get shaken by every challenge or criticism, because you know what you've survived. You know what you've endured. You know what you've rebuilt. And that kind of confidence can't be taught. It can only be earned. And you've earned it. The truth is, the experiences that broke you open are the same experiences that now give you depth and compassion. You see people more clearly because of what you've lived. You feel more deeply because of what you felt. You understand pain so you can understand people. You understand struggle so you can lead with patience. You understand loss so you can appreciate presence. You understand fear so you recognize courage when it shows up in your own life. None of that came from ease. All of it came from the parts of your journey you once wished you could erase. And that's why reframing your experiences is powerful. Because when you shift how you interpret your past, you shift how you show up in your future. If you still see your past as failure, you move hesitantly. If you still see your past as proof of inadequacy, you shrink back. If you still see your past as loss, you live cautiously, afraid to try again. But if you see your past as preparation, you walk forward with conviction. You step into opportunities with certainty. You stop doubting your resilience. You stop questioning your worth. You stop holding back your potential. You begin to understand that you're not starting from scratch, you're starting from experience. And experience is fuel. Experience is leverage. Experience is the foundation you build on. Every time you thought you were losing, you were gaining something deeper. Maybe not immediately, maybe not in a way you understood, maybe not in a way that felt good, but you gained something that shaped you, strengthened you, and sculpted you into the person capable of living the life you're now moving toward. And once that realization sinks in, you stop fearing the challenges ahead. You stop seeing difficulty as a threat. You stop interpreting discomfort as a sign that something's wrong. Instead, you recognize it for what it is, evolution. You understand that life is still preparing you, still growing you, still strengthening you for the things you've asked for. You start welcoming growth instead of resisting it. You start trusting that every experience, whether it feels good or painful, is part of your preparation for what's next. So look at your journey with new eyes. See the patterns, see the lessons, see the ways you've grown, see the strength you never gave yourself credit for. You didn't go through what you went through to end up defeated. You went through it to become ready for more, ready for better, ready for the next version of your life, because nothing in your story was wasted. And now finally you're prepared.